notifications and approvals have a huge impact to that employee experience. So you can either support someone getting their job done better and faster, or you can be adding noise, clutter, and distractions.
8th, 2023, and today's topic is notifications and approvals in lists and libraries. The gang is all here, and we will get started. So today's agenda is defining what notifications and approvals means to us on the Microsoft 365 platform. Emily, as usual, is going to take us through all her wonderful knowledge on UX better practices. Mark is going to start us off with some maturity model approaches. And then Mark, Emily, and Derek are going to talk to us about the various out-of-the-box ways that we can do things. So list and library alerts, rules, and Power Automate approvals. And then I will take us through extending things. Derek is going to do Power Automate approvals, and I'm going to do a configurable custom approval solution that as a demo of something I've built previously. So let's move on, and Em, take it away.
All right, so before we dive into the different ways that we can set these up in Microsoft 365, just wanted to level set us on definitions and some differences in use cases between notifications and approvals. So some of them are pretty intuitive. You know, a notification is one way, pretty routine, while approvals go both ways because we need to reply to them. They're a little bit more structured and formal. Very often we're aligning this with some kind of business process. Now, often in organizations, you might decide who does what on projects based off of something like a RACI chart. Notifications align with informing someone and keeping you aware, but approvals are making it really clear that someone is responsible. So we have very different use cases of why we would use each one. Now, when it comes to thinking about the impact to your employees and maybe even the projects that you're working on, notifications are something that you can't necessarily hold someone to and say, you know, someone could miss that notification and you can't necessarily measure them off of that. So it's a bit deniable. Since an approval you're interacting with, there is no plausible deniability there. I either clicked approve or reject, right? So we know that I interacted with it. And that also means that there is required interaction, which can sometimes cause delays. So overall, be really thoughtful before you pick notification or approval, given these different impacts. Now, something that you might all be experiencing we have on the next slide is called the vortex. So it's this idea that I am going to do one single interaction and then I get sucked into a series of unplanned interactions. I don't know about you, this happens anytime that I touch my phone. It's very distracting to have MFA on your phone because when you inevitably approve your MFA, you're also noticing your personal email notifications, your Twitter push notifications, Instagram, everything, right? So just be aware that we're already battling this in our day-to-day life. And I know that Microsoft is talking a lot about employee experience right now, but notifications and approvals have a huge impact to that employee experience. So you can either support someone getting their job done better and faster, or you can be adding noise, clutter, and distractions. So in general, I think you want to be really thoughtful about when you employ these different items and then how you set them up. So let's take a look at some of these different UX better practices that we want to use. So for starters, notifications. This is a quick hit of information. It's informed, it's just an FYI. Keep this really concise and timely. If you're ever going to have it be for more urgent content, like especially if you're using SMS notifications, it shouldn't be like Mark edited the Ask Simpraxis slide on a Tuesday. I don't need to be getting a text message about that. That is way too high of a priority on an FYI piece of information. Now, writing for the web applies here. I know I talk about it a lot in Ask Simpraxis. You want to make sure whether it's a notification or approval, you're using clear subject lines to summarize. Make sure you're front loading information. So when someone is scanning those first 11 characters, it's really clear. Very often I see people build approvals and notifications, and instead they're adding as a prefix like the site, the name of the flow, then the individual information. reverse that, because what I need to act on is probably what you're putting at the end of that subject line.
Yep.
Now, for notifications, you also want to provide all necessary information. So, true story, I was in Mexico the night before my flight. I was taking flight from one coast to the other, and I got an email notification that said there have been changes to your flights. Didn't reference any detail about what's been changed on my flight. Unfortunately for me, it was after hours to call the airline. I didn't have international calling, and their website was not supported on mobile. So all I knew was that my flight changed, and I had no concept around what changed about it. Obviously, that caused a lot of stress for me, bad experience. You don't want to be doing that to your colleagues and employees either. If we
What
give
was the
people
change? Did you get home? What
no,
happened?
my flight, no, yeah, fair
She's
question.
still in Mexico. Didn't you know her
Yeah,
background?
it's been years. It's been a while.
Yes.
No, the end of that story is that at the time, my manager actually was from Mexico. The one promise I told her when I went was I would not drive. And so my flight was canceled and rescheduled for 5 days later. And I had to go to Pujol, if anyone's watched Chef Table. So couldn't miss my reservation. I rented a car, drove across the Devil's Spine, 11 hours across Mexico, lived. But yeah, no, it was not great.
Oh,
All right. You can't set us up like that and then not give us the resolution. Like I
That's
was on
fair,
the edge of my
that's
seat
fair.
here.
Todd hates those things.
It's why everyone joined Aspen Praxis, I'm sure. It's not the UX better practices. It's what happened to Emily in Mexico. Also, Pujol was great. I highly recommend it. Again, presenting all necessary information. You don't want to have to ask someone to switch context, spend additional time finding that. It's going to slow down their ability to deliver on it, cause stress for them. And then for approvals, they might be getting approvals all kinds of different places. If you have the opportunity to provide that centralized management, that probably sets them up for more success, because we all know that as individuals, using our email inboxes as a content management system is not the best.
For sure. All right. Maturity model, Mark.
Yeah.
Done.
So, when we think about how people are using the platform, we sort of at a lower maturity level, the question is, what do you mean notifications and approvals? Why would I use those, right? I've just put a bunch of files in the sky, right? There's really not much going on. We're doing everything on an ad hoc level. Maybe a level 200, you're starting to think about maybe there's some task-driven views, and those views are your notification scheme, right? If I see something in the view, I must need to do something about it. That sometimes works. It's not a horrible solution, but it's not very sophisticated. Sort of around the level of 300, we start to get into, maybe you're using alerts and rules. You're using some of the out-of-the-box approval templates that set up Power Automate flows in SharePoint Online. So you're using the platform for some of the capabilities that that it offers to you, but you're sort of dipping your toe in and using the pretty much out of the box settings, as opposed to altering your flows, which would come at more of a level 400. You're taking a look at the approval flows that you get with those templates, and you're customizing them to reflect your business process, not what Microsoft suggests as a business process. All of those out-of-the-box templates can be really, really helpful, and they may be adequate. But generally speaking, your business process is going to be a little bit different. In this case, we have 3 approvals, and they have to go in sequence, or we have 2 approvers, and they have to be at once. But if it's over this dollar amount, then we have to do this other thing. And then finally, really at a very high level of sophistication, and Julie's going to show you what we mean by this, is bespoke solutions, things where you've coded up a solution to help with notifications and approvals that maybe it provides an entire dashboard of everything you need to do across lots of different content areas. Maybe it shows you ways to build your processes with a specialized UI. You don't necessarily have to write code in Power Platform. You have to write code to provide the engine to do it. And that's where you really want to focus on sort of the most important processes in your organization, the things that are really critical to you being successful.
Yep, I think that's a really good summary of what we're talking about. So out of the box library alerts, what do we got there?
So most often when I am building the lower maturity level team sites, new comm sites, this meets majority of the needs. Essentially what we can do is set up alerts to yourself or multiple people. They can be email or text. It can be based off of the change type. So any change in the library, new documents added, something was modified, something was deleted. And then it also can be scoped based off of who's making those changes. Anyone made a change, someone else made a change, or specifically someone touched a document that I created or modified, and I want to be aware of what's going on. Then of course we can bundle those. So you can either get it immediately, daily, or weekly. We have some limitations below, which I would say is a small flag, just because a lot of these are a high volume of notification limitations. And as we talked about earlier with those UX better practices, we really want to reduce how often we're doing this. So you shouldn't really run into much with those. These are really good option for these alerts, just to have those FYIs in your inbox of what is the activity happening across your sites. There is your activity web part in your team sites as well. So I've actually seen a decrease across clients wanting to get these alerts and just using that to opt in when they're mentally ready. So just be aware that alerts are going to opt you into thinking about something versus there are web parts that support you seeing recent changes when you want to opt into seeing that kind of information.
That could go a long way to fixing that sort of like getting you distracted vortex issue for sure. I hate alerts. full disclosure, not my favorite thing. So Todd, how do we manage those out of the box alerts? Come on,
so
admin, show us.
Now that you've all talked about how terrible alerts are and nobody wants them.
I don't. So tell me how to turn it off.
Yeah. So as an admin, here are some things that I had to add. Number one, we've shown that dialogue, add alert. Notice how that dialogue doesn't say add an alert for me. It just says add an alert. And 99% of the time we use that to add an alert for ourselves. But if you have enough permissions, you can add alerts for other people or manage the alerts that other people are getting. So not just add more spam to Julie, though that is a very fulfilling experience to just go add alerts for Julie.
You do that and we're going to have words.
So I wanted to bring up a couple of things. Number one, that you can use that dialog box to manage alerts for yourself or other people. Emily brought up when we were practicing this, that's also a good way to see what alerts are in a place if you want to copy that experience someplace else if you're migrating things. So you can do it there. And then I also never miss an opportunity to mention you could use PowerShell for this. So you can use get PNP alert, remove PNP alert. So, potentially a provisioning thing, or again, automating your annoying of Julie. You could do something like that, but there is a PowerShell option for that as well.
I see we're going to have to speak later.
I got my big boy pants on today, Julie.
Apparently you do. Mark, let's get Todd out of the way and talk about something else.
When you said if Todd does that, there would be words, I figured it was thank you. That's too
So you're the best.
Well played. Well played. Yes.
I believe it was in 2021, Microsoft added this capability to lists and libraries and made a fairly big fanfare about it, and I don't know that anyone ever really paid much attention. As an alternative for alerts, you can set up what are called rules, and they are a little bit more, I think they make a little bit more sense to your average user, and they also have different triggers. So that top image is how you create a rule. When a column changes, when a column value changes, when a new item is created, sort of the standard one, and an item is deleted, that's not something that you can do with alerts. So you have different triggers, which is cool. And then you have a much more wizard-like UI to actually set up the rule. Each one of those little blanks, it's like a Mad Libs fill in the blanks thing, except nowhere near as fun because you can't type whatever you want. You can't type poop. You have to actually use like the name of a list or something. And so, depending on which one of those options that you chose, you get a different set of prompts, and it's actually quite logical and sensical to go through it. Next slide. And then there's the management of your existing rules. Also a much simpler UI. That alerts, manage my alerts page is actually pretty intimidating. It's got lots of options and you have to read lots of words and figure out radio buttons and stuff. This is much more straightforward. You can also, a nice thing about rules is you can turn them off and then turn them back on later. So if you've already got them configured and you know you're going to add a whole bunch of content, you don't want to get alerts, or I'm sorry, you don't want to get notifications from the rules, you can turn off those rules during that time and then turn them back on, which is not something you can do with. So another option, I figured when they came out with rules, alerts were going to go away, but they're still around. So.
Nice. All right, DCP, what do we got about Power Automate stuff?
Yeah.
What stuff do we got?
So your options for really creating those approval notifications boil down to Power Automate or a custom solution. Power Automate solutions are not the same thing as our old school, content approvals or page approvals. Although we were just discussing before we started today that some of those fields are still available. They just don't provide actual notifications and approvals. So you may see if you turn content approval on in a list or library that you get the approval status. That is not connected to any of these Power Automate solutions. So the cool thing is that you can just go into the user interface and under the Integrate tab, not the Automate tab, you see Power Automate and you can create a flow. There are a whole host of templates that you can use. And, Mark Anderson is really fond of saying, 90% of workflows just send an email and do that notification piece. You can do that. It's the first one right there. Send a customized email when a new file is added. Although that would violate almost all of Emily's, sort of UX best practices. So there's a whole bunch of different ideas here that you can use and templates that you can use. You can notify in Teams when an item is created. You can you can request an approval in Teams when an item is selected. And that's really good because you give a sort of a breadth of choices for how you want your workflow to go. It integrates with email, it integrates with Teams, it integrates with adaptive cards. The other thing is you can configure these on a list or library basis. And you can also have multiple workflows per list or per library, depending on what the situation might be. So maybe it's a initial review or initial approval workflow, and that can go off to one set of people, and then a final approval can go off to somebody else. There are some limitations here, and this is sort of where I was talking about the old school approval status. Back in the day, content approval would create drafts of documents. So you could have something that was in approval that was sort of in a draft state that unless you had edit access to the site, you couldn't see. But unfortunately, all these approval workflows don't actually work with that unless you modify them. So basically, everybody can see it. It's just a flag to determine what the state is or isn't. The other thing that I found out while I was testing this is you need to make sure that your approvers have access to your document that you're trying to send it to them. Because when you go through the user interface, it doesn't actually check for you to see whether the person has access. So I had my test user, they clicked on the thing and they got the big ol' access denied.
So that's useful.
So, exactly. And by default, the flows in general in Power Automate runs under the account that they were created in. And they can only be used by that person unless, and this is like a fiddly little box at the very bottom where you have to explicitly add run only users. So I went through, I created a workflow in Power Automate. It was working great for my one account. Then I went to test the reverse, and lo and behold, that person couldn't see it because I hadn't set the run only users. And also, and I don't know how many folks on the call work in a multilingual environment, but especially if you're in an organization that maybe is in Canada and you have some users who are speaking French and some who are speaking English, workflow names are not translated because there's no machine translation. So if you have someone who their language profile is set up for French and they create a flow and they name it in French, it will show up as French to all English speaking users. So if you want to go to the next slide, Jewel.
Mm-hmm.
Here's an example of what it looks like. You click the Automate button, you get the document approval workflow. It's going to pop up the screen on the right-hand side that lets you put in a comment for the approver. and type in the person's name. And again, it does not check for access. And then you click run flow. And then this particular workflow I created sends an approval in Teams. And so if you go to the next slide, this is what it looks like for the approver. They can see it right in Teams. They can see a list of everything that's gone through, and they can get a link to the document, and you can see there, they can look at it, they can review it, and then they can flip back and they can approve it right here. And they can also reassign it if this isn't for them, or they can reject it and provide a comment. And now it's all good to go and it's approved. And if you go to the next slide, so that's sort of the out of the box story. And it's hard to say sort of like, yes, it's out of the box, but you do need to customize and configure it for every single library you're working in. So you've got to go into Power Automate and do all of those things. But the advantage of that is that because it is in Power Automate, you can also take each and every instance of that and customize it however you need to. So you use the out of the box template as a base, but then you can take it and you can, modify it. So say you're doing a purchase order approval, and anything under $500 just gets approved, goes to level 1 manager, but anything over 500 goes to level 2. You can go into the out of the box workflow, edit that, and start creating customized versions of that. If you wanted to do this on a specific type of document or a specific content type, you could do it there. You can also start to integrate with the external systems as long as they have an API. So if you need to, throw a ticket into ServiceNow, you can absolutely do that.
Of course, you got to pay for those connectors, though.
You do. If you're using premium connectors, you'll have to pay for those. And one of the limitations here, if you do need to make edits to, I think we've talked about this several times regarding flow. If you need to make edits to any list item or document and the metadata attached to it using a flow, the account that created the flow is the one that's doing the work. So any of your last modified, any of your created, all of those are going to be whatever the account is that's logged into the connection. So if that's me, then my name is going to be all over the place. Generally, we recommend using a service account for stuff like that so that you can at least identify that. And finally, because Power Automate and flows are attached individually at the list or library level, without doing a lot of sort of code gymnastics, there isn't a way to have a central management. So if you have like one workflow that you want to go across multiple libraries, there's not really a good and easy way to get that done. So you've got to go in and recreate it multiple times.
Yeah, and that's a pain.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Chris Kent was on fire around some Power Automate. And so it was just him sort of talking through the fact, or tweeting about the fact that, some of this stuff is just ridiculously advanced for what Microsoft likes to brand as power user type of, stuff. So, it's just something to keep in mind that, although it is branded that way, it's not necessarily that way. I can attest, comparing two dates took me an inordinate amount of time, to get to work right. It's just, sometimes it can be very, very frustrating. So it's not for the faint of heart. All right, so let me take over now and talk about the idea of a configurable custom approval solution. So one of the things that we sort of were just talking about with this Power Automate flows is that they're highly customizable and really flexible and can be amazing, but you have to, per library or list, you have to build that out. And yes, it has a user interface, but as we were just sort of discussing, and as Chris was sort of pointing out on Twitter, they can be not for the faint of heart. And so, what if you want something that is that configurable, but isn't that hard to use? So this idea of creating a configurable custom approval solution that you could add to any list or library. It then maybe gives the non-power users the ability to create those flows, but with a very tailored and specific user interface that is really obvious to them of how to configure, and they can be trained on it. We could do training materials on it, et cetera, et cetera. And that configuration can be tailored to your organizational needs. Like, what if you're in a regulatory environment and you need the ability to validate that when somebody approves something, the document hasn't changed since that approval happened? We could build that kind of solution into our custom approval solutions, where we can't do that with some of the Power Automate things, and certainly not easily. So, you know, again, with these custom configuration, custom solutions, we can also meet your users where they are by providing Teams notifications and customizations using the SharePoint framework to really give them a good user experience. Okay. So I think that rounds up all of our different notification and approval solutions. We've got a long list of resources for you. We are presenting in Teams, so you should be able to click on any of those that you want to click on. I'll stay here for a hot second. We'll just say we've got the manage, view, or delete SharePoint alerts. That's a Microsoft support document. Configuring forms and rules in Microsoft lists. 5 reasons you need to embrace Microsoft Flow. That's our friend Greg Zelfon, SharePoint Maven. Transactional notifications, their characteristics and when to use them. That's Nielsen Norman. And another Nielsen Norman, indicators, validations, and notifications. Pick that correct communication option. I'm sure those are really great resources from Emily. And approval flow for modern pages as well. Cool. That wraps us up for this week. Next, 2 weeks from now, February 22nd, we are going to go into search optimization. We have some really interesting little tidbits on doing search optimization. I think we all have an opinion on this in one way, shape, or form. If you have any questions or ideas for future Asks in Praxis, or things that you are just thinking about that you think would make a good episode, please feel free to drop us a line using that Asks in Praxis form there. SimpInfo, Asks in Praxis. It's just an anonymous form. You can drop some information in there, and we review those regularly. And if we can, we'll build a whole session around it, or we might do another Asks in Praxis anything type of session and combine a bunch of them together if they're smaller, quicker, easier things to answer. We are in conference crazed zone at this point. We are everywhere. So Microsoft Collaboration Conference, that's May 2nd through 4th in Las Vegas. I will be there. TechRama, that's in Antwerp, Belgium. Todd, I should have let you say it because you like to say it so much. Todd's going to Belgium. The European Collaboration Summit in Dusseldorf. Mark, Emily, Derek, and myself will all be there. I'm really looking forward to that one. I have not been to Germany, and a lot of great people at that one. I'm excited to go. Mark is going to the Thrive Conference in Slovenia. Emily is also. And then again, we're in force at the 365 EduCon conference in DC in June. That is Mark, Emily, Derek, and myself as well. And if anybody is interested, you have dev friends in your life, Cloud Dev Clarity Show with myself and Andrew Connell, dropping new episode recently on the State of JavaScript survey. So do check that out if you're interested. Wow, that wraps us up to exactly a half an hour. I thank everyone for joining us again. We really appreciate all those people who come here in person, make the questions and comments. We love that. Thank you, and we will see you in a couple of weeks. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for joining us this week on Asks in Praxis. We love getting your questions or session ideas. You can submit by using the link in About. If you find this helpful, hit that like or subscribe button and share this content with your colleagues. Join us again as we release new content every other Wednesday.